What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp. This is Common Bengals W for January 6th, and this is actually for last week's game. Obviously, last week's game did not exactly inspire me to do a show immediately after. The Bengals playoff hopes are officially dashed. I will still be going to the game Sunday, barring whatever I've got going on with my throat right now, this sickness getting worse or something like that. But the playoff hopes are dashed, but I still have hopes for a winning season. And this obviously is not the season in which Bengals fans hoped for. Definitely not the one I hope for as a season ticket holder. But all things considered, up until last week, it was an exciting season. The Bengals were at least alive with a backup quarterback through season or through week 16. And that's more than I could really ask for, all things considered, with Jamar Chase missing time and Cam Taylor-Britt missing time and T. Higgins missing time, Joe Burrow missing half the season. Like, it's not optimal. So the Cincinnati Bengals get their ass whipped by the Chiefs. Just not a good game. Not going to be a whole lot of talk about that. This is going to be a much more abbreviated game. But we are starting to see why Jake Browning was a backup quarterback, right? Like that's what we're starting to see. We're starting to understand why exactly it was that he wasn't starting elsewhere. He was 19 for 33, had a touchdown, and no interceptions. He ran the ball a little bit, but there was talk, maybe they trade him and they get something for him. That's just not going to happen. He is a backup quarterback. He has been a very, very solid backup quarterback to Joe Burrow. It seemed like the season was over the moment that Joe Burrow snapped his wrist, and it was against the Ravens, and already had dug this monster hole in the division. And what we ended up getting was a guy who by tomorrow will have started 7 games. He won 3 of them, 9 touchdowns, 6 picks. Now, there were a couple of those picks that were just ridiculous, but he also scored 3 rushing touchdowns. So 12 touchdowns in about 9 games or 8 games. Okay, sorry about that. 12 touchdowns in really 7 games played out of your backup quarterback. I'll take that. And picking up 3 wins along the way, that's more than I really expected. I'll tell you what was particularly frustrating about last week's game. There are some opportunities on 4th down where I look at it and I go, okay, Zach Taylor's gotta not play coward ball. But then there are some instances where you're like, man, just take the points. If you've got this lead, just take the points. And they went into that. They played pretty decent that first half. And it looked like, okay, maybe the Bengals can win this. Then they go into Cleveland the next week, and you see where things are now. You got Driscoll playing in Cleveland. Well, maybe they would be looking at 10 wins, and the Cleveland Browns would still be playing Driscoll because they've got 11 wins. And it'd be a much different game. And there were some really terrible calls in this game. I mean, I can't even really wrap my head around some of them and really even put myself into the mindset that I had as they were occurring last week. But it's just one of those things I've come to expect against the Chiefs. It didn't cost the Bengals the game, really. There were just a few really bad plays by Jake Browning that really put a bow on the season. There was just a weird intentional grounding call that has never been an intentional grounding call in the history of the NFL. It was seriously one of the worst intentional grounding calls you will ever see in the NFL. And quite honestly, listen, if the Bengals would have kicked that field goal, taken those points, we're looking at a 5-point differential. And when you're looking at a differential of 5 to 8 points, man, you never know how people would have played it. But like when you see the defense selling out on the run on 4th and 1, and you still run, like you didn't even call a timeout. Like that was so important. The Bengals were up 17-13 at that point. 17-13 on 4th and 1 at the 6. And you don't call a timeout when you see the defense selling out for the run. That's the difference in being up 17-13 and being up 20-13 and it being a tie game when Kansas City goes up the field and scores. Awuzie got burned. He got bailed out with an overthrow, but I think that a lot of things are going to change for this team. There's one thing that I truly believe. The Bengals would have been a first-round exit in the playoffs, even if Joe Burrow was healthy, because this defense, despite the incredible playmakers in which they have, they give up so much yardage. So much yardage. If you watch this show, you knew how much it aggravated me throughout the first half of this season when people would look at the turnover numbers and they'd go, man, that defense is great. That defense is great. No, it wasn't. They gave up stuff all year long. You could spam plays over the middle. You could, I mean, if Bengals wide receivers were as wide open as literally anybody else, man, then, Chase would have had 15 touchdowns, even in an abbreviated period, but that's just not the way it works. Mixon was like making contact and just falling over. That's something we're going to be talking about after the season. So we'll do our Common Bengals W after the Browns game as well. But then we'll probably go position by position because I want to keep doing content because football is something that, man, it's really forced like days off for me while covering wrestling, which if you follow wrestling, you know that I need. But we'll look at the quarterback position, obviously, and Joe Burrow and the big injury question marks there. Good news is they don't have to go out and get a quarterback. We'll talk about that at length. Running back position is going to be a big question mark. Wide receiver is a big question mark. Tight end, I don't think as much as one as people claim. Offensive line, I think there's some question marks there. The defense is a bunch of question marks, especially with the DJ Reader situation now. The Cincinnati Bengals are the worst tackling defense in the NFL. They're just the worst. And this was a feud that before this season, I thought the Chiefs and the Bengals had the best rivalry in the AFC, maybe football. And it's wild because they weren't even in the same division. The Bengals play in the most competitive division. I won't say it's the best division. They play in the most competitive division in the NFL. I mean, there's a chance after tomorrow that every team in the AFC North has a winning record. That's insane. Like, there's a real chance, as I'm looking at it, my God. Like, there's a chance that on average, the average team in the AFC North has above 10 wins. That's nuts. That's nuts. And Pittsburgh did it with a variety of quarterbacks. Cincinnati did it with a backup quarterback. Cleveland did it with a variety of quarterbacks. It's just wild to watch unfold. It's funny because I want to say a couple good things about Jake Browning. Him blocking for Mixon on one of those runs was so dope. The opening drive of the Chiefs game, fantastic. One of the early drives was the fastest I'd seen Mixon run all season. It was really good. It was really good to see some of that. But then you see a guy like Isaiah Pacheco that runs for 7.2, 130 yards, 7.2 a carry, 130 yards, and then he catches another 35. And you're like, man, the Bengals can't tackle and they have no interior defense. It's really bad. The one thing I'll compliment them on is they held Travis Kelce to jack shit. That is my compliment for the Cincinnati Bengals. they held Kelsey to nothing. And that was very, very impressive to me. Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. He's the most talented quarterback in the NFL. Jamar Chase is not going to get that single season receptions record. We knew that. Tanner Hudson's a guy that they got to look at bringing back. Chase Brown, listen, he can catch the ball, but he hasn't on the ground given the Bengals a lot of reason to not bring Mixon back. Again, a full podcast for the future as I learn a little bit more. The tight end position is one that I look at and I go, okay, Tanner Hudson, if he's willing to come back, that would be interesting. They got more tight end production this year than they did last year, and they had Hayden Hurst last year. Get well soon, Hayden Hurst, by the way. I think that he was dealing with amnesia. Really, really unfortunate to see. We talked about that a while back, but he got put on IR. But I think that Tanner Hudson could be back. I think they'll probably draft a tight end like late, like very late. Tim says, is Lou Anarumo's safe defense style a part of the Bengals' problem? Yeah, I think that Lou Anarumo probably coached his way out of a potential head coaching job because he was like one of the big head coaching snubs last year. And then all of a sudden, like I'd be shocked if he got interviews this year. Maybe some out of courtesy. It wasn't good. It wasn't good. And it wasn't even really Mahomes that dominated, even though Rashee Rice, Jesus Christ, it felt like everything was like 30-40, 30-40. Because he had that 67-yarder too. Jake Browning got sacked 6 times. On that last drive, it was like 3 or 4 times in a row. All the money, think of all the money that has been spent on the Bengals offensive line this year. Think about it. So much, and they have still been sacked 47 times, I think it is. 47 times this season. It's more than last year. They got sacked 44 times last year. And if we're talking about quarterbacks only got sacked 42 times last year. Quarterbacks have already been sacked 46 times this year. They have spent more and more money to get actively worse at that. Now, okay, some of that is Jake Browning. And hey, you know what? I'll take 46 over 56, which is what was happening in 2021. How many was it in 2020? 48. Man, that's wild. That's wild that in Joe Burrow's rookie year, they had about the same number of sacks as now. That is insane. Well, I can't continue to drive myself insane. The Steelers won. Go figure. The Steelers' bad season is a 10-win season. Wish that was our problem. We're going to head into, or not head into Cleveland. We're going to hopefully beat Cleveland on Sunday. I'll be there in the absolute terrible weather. I'll be bringing you guys a Common Bengals W. I hope that some of you guys will hang out with me in the offseason. We're going to evaluate quarterback, running back, tight end, wide receiver, offensive line, and the defense in totality in probably individual episodes. We will go for the draft, like pre-draft and post-draft. So there will be at least, and then we'll do a full season look back as well. So I'm expecting at least 10 episodes in the off season. Just, whenever I've got a little bit of time, whenever I've got some ability to do things like that, we'll be doing those. And hopefully you guys will come hang out with me. This is very much a hobby of mine. It isn't something that I'm looking to make like a career or anything like that. But that was not a Common Bengals W. No mid-draft, day one recap. We'll probably do a midday. We'll probably do a day one recap, I would say. Till next time, guys, we're out.